basically try and share my story with you. Yes. Okay. So this story has all the classics of sort of elements of a transformation. What you'll hear this morning, basically people, culture, and execution. Right? But I wanted to give you sort of some of those anecdotes of how we went through it. Right? So against this company of change, what we were trying to do, you have an industry also that is undergoing a lot of disruption. Right? The pharma industry in the Philippines, it's about a $2 to $3 billion US dollar industry. It's been growing 3 to 4% in the past 5 years, and there's a lot of new entrants coming in, competition from China, from South Asia, Indian companies, Bangladeshis, Pakistan companies. So there's a lot of disruption, also a lot of regulatory change going on with more generics, pricing pressures. So within this sort of swirl of change, you also have traditional family businesses sort of trying to cope with it and trying to figure out what to do, right? And then you have me also sort of coming in. So my personal story is, as Richard alluded to, is I was born in the Philippines but grew up in the U.S., practiced corporate litigation in Texas, and some in New York. So my background was, similar to Wall Street, long hours, right? One example of sort of the type of culture I was a part of was we wore suits to work, full suits, right? And they said, look, the only casual day is Sunday. Right? So people are familiar with that sort of culture. So I'm going from that to coming back to the Philippines, basically a traditional local business, right? Which was a little different. One example is, I remember one day, one of my first few days, I was working, got in early, and so it's around 11:30, 11:45, and I was thinking, look, I'll just eat at my desk and just continue working. And around 11:50, I look outside my office, and all of the lights are off, right? So I look out, and the lights are off. I see very few people. I look in some of the other office, and I see one person's just taking a nap, right? Sort of head underneath newspaper, and I keep on walking around, and then I'm like, okay, I'll wait, right? So I go back to my office, continue to work. 1:15, the lights come back on, right? And so, I asked people, what happened? It's like, well, it's lunchtime. It's really just time for rest, and we turn off the lights. So that's just sort of an example for me of, wow, okay, it's a little different, but we'll see. Let's see what we can do. So, so this is the story of how I came into this sort of environment and really try and change things, right? More to just improve some aspects, keep some aspects, some of the really positive aspects, but really try and develop our capabilities, right? So within this environment, the question for me, but also hopefully we'll have some resonance here, is how do you lead in this new environment, right? In a situation where you try and transform an organization. For the past, I would say about 64, 63 years, experiencing a lot of success in the industry, risen to, you're in the top 10 largest corporations in the Philippines. And so, but with this new environment, you have to change, right? So a different level of success requires different tactics, right? So within this transformation, right, as I said before, the people, the culture, the execution, I sort of want to try and highlight those sorts of themes with some sort of metaphors here, right? A very curious but critical fact that I came across, which has actually helped to explain a lot, right? Which I think is one of the key elements of transformation, is the fact that the Philippines is ranked number 1 in the world in a particular category, right? So there are very few numbers in my slide. But this is, if you're going to keep one number in your head, this is it. It's going to be this one. So, the Gallup, which is a polling service in the US, they ran a poll that looked at all the countries in the world. And the Philippines ranked number 1 in the world in this particular category. So the question was actually, which country has the least emotional people in the world, right? So Singapore is actually number 1. The country with the least emotional people. The one that ranked last was the Philippines, right? So, which means that Filipinos are the most emotional people in the world, right? And even though my wife isn't Filipino, I think she probably has some blood in that because she's really, really dramatic, right? So, so for me, what does that mean, right? From a management, from a leadership point of view, what does that mean for executives? If you're trying to be effective, if you're trying to marshal an organization to change. So for me, it's about people and understanding it, really understanding what does that mean in a corporate setting, in sort of dynamic examples where you have just more combustible type people. So chapter 1, right? Sort of leads on that is, and I'll explain that a little later. So, I'm going to tell you a small confession about myself. I'm an impatient person, right? So, I worked in an environment of corporate litigation where there are deadlines, and it's really, really fast-paced, right? On some sort of cases, right, when you're working sort of 18 hours a day, I used to sometimes sleep next to my desk, right? Sort of that, that intensity. One of my first reactions in coming back was really a lot of frustration, right? Frustration in a new environment, different pace, different speed, different types of communication, right? So in litigation, it's a lot of confrontation, a lot of paper tigers, right? So nasty letters, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And so I'm coming into an environment where, it's different. So a lot of frustration, and I think there's a tendency to judge, to criticize, to complain, all of that. But I was lucky to find, some really, really solid people, right? So if I was going to be effective, I had to find a way to be effective, right? Because you enter into an organization, and if you think you're going to change it just by yourself, right? That's a little delusional, right? You have to find people that will help you and that, that you can work with. So I remember, walking into the office of some people and really finding kindred spirits, right? So solid, competent person, and we talked, and she sort of had some ideas about change, how to change, but she said, look, we're sort of a traditional company. You sort of have to take it slowly. You have to sort of calibrate your speed, right? I mean, you're coming from a different environment, and you really have to find a way to be effective. Otherwise, you're going to be knocking your head against the wall again and again. So, and then I also remembered this other person, and sort of gone on a hiring spree, trying to hire some sort of solid people. And I remember telling her, during the interview, I was like, look, we really want to change this organization, and so I really want you to come on board. First, we're going to start with some departments, and then we're going to sort of spread it out to the entire organization, right? And it's going to be challenging, right? You're going to be going through the gauntlet, through the fire, in a sense, but we're going to try and do it together and try and find ways to make it work. So in looking at these two individuals, right, really helped me see about really slowly building a team. So, and it's really about, resisting that impulse to complain, right, and to judge and to just accelerate. So really for me, this thing of don't be a hater, right? We're trying to create an environment where you can believe, right? Believe in a positive change. And so oftentimes we try and, at least in my company, really create more opportunities for believing in people, right? And resisting the impulse to be negative. So it's really a campaign. It was a campaign of winning hearts and minds, right? I mean, it was all about that. And because some people are just perpetually walking under a cloud of rain, right? You see them and it's just, the energy is not good. So what we were trying to do, and oftentimes I was like that, right? But then, I had to change just in order to just make things more positive and creating that sort of culture. So what we try and do is really create an environment to believe in and where everyone can succeed. And so in looking at the different types of people, right, we know A type of people, B type of people, C type of people, right? The A's, very easy to sort of manage and there's not a lot of work involved. It's really setting those objectives and they can run with it, right? It's sort of the B and C type of people in an organization where that's a little more challenging, right? And so I come from a company where we rarely fire people, right? We really nurturing environment. Our employees, 20, 30, 40 years, right? And so even though times change, some people don't sort of adjust to that pace, right? And so in an organization where you sort of have a variety of people with all of these different skills, you really have to find ways where you can put those people in positions where they can be effective and they can succeed, right? So it's a lot more patience and empowerment and really finding those positions and those areas and roles where they can succeed. So really not being a hater, right? So. Next one. So another personal fact, right, about myself. So I have 3 daughters, and I'm really deathly scared about this, right? Just because they're daughters. And so they're now 11, 9, and 7. So we were homeschooling maybe 5 years, 5, 6 years, right? And so recently we put them into school, right? And it's a co-ed school, but single-sex classrooms, right? And so as a father, you sort of want to protect them as a parent, right? Especially it's their first time. But you can't be there all the time. So I've tried to always give them some sort of advice. And so for me, the principle of Ohana is appropriate, right? So I don't know how many people know what that word means, but it comes from the movie Lilo and Stitch, right? So it's a cartoon. I'm sure everyone who has kids sort of knows about cartoons and those type of movies. So Ohana is that principle of which I've tried to tell them, right? Nobody gets left behind, right? So when I'm with my daughters, like, don't leave your sisters behind. Everyone's always together. And so this sort of principle, I think, within a family business, it's sort of what distinguishes it from a more multinational type of environment where It's really, you're judged by performance a lot of times, just strictly performance, and it's either sometimes an up or out system, or you get two chances, and if you can't really sort of perform, then you're sort of transitioned out. And so that's sort of some of the things that, as a family business in a point of transition, we're trying and grappling with. And so, but when I think of Ohana, right, and think of the employees who have given 30 years, right? So we have a particular employee. He has worked for the company for 40 years. So he worked for my grandparents. He worked for my uncle, my mother. At some point, I worked with him. And then he also spent some time with my kids, right? So 4 generations, right? And sort of he's getting a little older. And his former position, the capabilities aren't as strong. And so he had asked us, well, I really want to stay, but, it was hard to find a position for him, right? But just because of that sort of experience with us, right? Those 40 years. He actually once took a bullet for the company because he was delivering something and it was carjacked. His car was carjacked, and he was shot, right? Sort of while he was doing our business. So those sorts of things, right, you remember and you value. So we basically found a position for him, or created a position that he could really enjoy, and that really also provided value for us. So when I think of Ohana, it's sort of that type of a principle and sort of a commitment to the employees, right? That we will try and find ways to bring you along, right? Even as we're in the process of changing, of trying to level up, of trying to become a company that's more performance-oriented, that's more accountable, we also try and provide the opportunities for our employees to either modify their skill set or really try. And even if, some don't succeed, right? We try and provide a very smooth transition out, and, something that provides them face, dignity, so that it really, at least if they are transitioning out, we show them, look, you're an amazing part of our company for a number of years, and we will sort of pay a lot, right? Golden parachute with some of these cases. And really to just give our organization to retain that reputation, that legacy of really caring about employees to that level. So the third chapter in this little story is on execution. Another interesting little fact, or at least a story about my family. So one evening, right? It's Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. So it's right before Lent, and we're sitting around the dinner table, and my kids and my wife, they're figuring out, okay, what are you going to give up for Lent, right? For the next 40 days. And given that it's Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday, we have a big spread. And everyone knows here, people love buffets here, right? And so I said that my daughter suggested, you have to give up something you really like, right? And so I was like, well, I didn't really want to give up much. And so my daughters were like, no, you have to give up something that really matters, right? That's, they said first fruits, right? It has to be part of something that's significant and part of your first fruits. So being a carnivore, right? Especially with pork, right? The Philippines does, or Asia does pork 20 different ways, from bacon, pork chops, pork floss, twice fried pork, lechon. It's really good, and so I loved it, right? And so my daughters said, okay, you got to give that up, right? If you want to show commitment, you really have to do it. So I said, okay, right? And And so I was traveling, also going on business trips, and you know, I mean, when you go on business trips, there's a lot of wining and dining. And I know a particular colleague, a friend also, a business colleague, but also a friend, he had also learned this story from my daughters. And so I was eating at this colleague's house, and he basically had also very nice spread. And this was during Lent, and he had some amazing Wagyu steak, right? And he had told this story to his wife. And so he says, Martin, you know, please eat. And his wife said, remember what your daughter said. And I was like, well, you know, I was sort of ambivalent. I was like, but then she reminded me, right? And so I said, okay, I won't eat it. So for me, so I did survive Lent without eating meat. And so my daughter, when she reminds me, it really sort of, for me, is illustrative of in a small way, right, of that sort of commitment that we're trying to build. So the metaphor of the chicken and the egg, right, is for me helpful in terms of understanding from a corporate or at least a business environment the difference between involvement and commitment, right? So the chicken lays eggs as part of a day's work, right? But the pig commits his life to being bacon and pork chops and all of that, right? That sort of commitment resonates at least for me. So how do you inspire, right? The key question, right? How do you inspire commitment, not only in individuals, but across an organization, right? Because it's only when you get that commitment that you'll get the execution, right? Which is, for me here in the Philippines, it's the execution, right? Very basic business principles here, right? So when we tried to improve our execution, for me, it was really finding a good team, right? So I'll take 10 really, really good people over 50 mediocre ones. And I'm sure people understand that. And when you create a committed organization, I mean, you see the effects, right? You see people staying up late. You see people coming in early. And this is on unpaid overtime, right? So I was talking with one of the other speakers here, and he's from SAP, right? And we have manufacturing operations, and we, in the past, really just do a lot of our data on Excel spreadsheets. And so a few years ago, we decided to automate, right? And so we got SAP, an ERP system. And, you know, it's a 2-year project, right? And it's a change in mindset, right? I mean, we get the software, we get all of the modules, but it was really trying to get people changing the mindset, right? And you find a few good people to be your super users, right? And to really try and catalyze everything, right? Because we're in a corporate culture where people, you know, the concept of barkada, right? With people going together, whether it's for merienda or for lunch. I mean, people go in big groups. And so for this particular ERP implementation, it was finding those sort of change agents, those catalysts that people follow and that can serve as the example, right, and the role model. And so I was, you know, extremely lucky in finding some very good people. And so now, right, with ERP, I mean, we've gone live, and it's been working for us, the data, the dashboard, all of that stuff. So it was an extremely, I think, an important project for us to see that we could implement something like that, and that people could buy in for the most part, and, you know, getting it to use it and to work. And it was a big investment, CapEx on our part. So it was not only convincing the board of directors, but also convincing senior management and really convincing the line people. You have to buy into this. I mean, it's the only way we're going to improve our supply chain or sourcing, procurement, that sort of thing. So on an execution, it was, senior management and really convincing the line people. You have to buy into this. I mean, it's the only way we're going to improve our supply chain or sourcing, procurement, that sort of thing. So on an execution, it was, I was really happy with it. And then we started really seeing a lot of commitment. And other stories, in terms of like finding role models, was our CEO. He's known for coming in really early. So a funny example is one day, right, I had a 5:50 flight out. I was going to go to Singapore for the day. And so I was looking for my passport and I couldn't find it, right? And it's like 3:45. And I couldn't find it at home, so I was like, okay, let me go to the office. Maybe I can find it there. So I go to the office. It's 4 a.m., right? And I look, I still can't find it. So I'm rushing down the elevator, right? 4:30, the door opens, and I see my CEO walking in, right? So every day he comes in at 4:30 a.m., and there's sort of a running joke in the organization of people try and beat him, coming in that early, right? And so, I mean, that's just a small example, right, of at least something that people can see, a very tangible evidence of, this sort of, the type of commitment, the type of hardworking culture that, we're trying to create. And that's something anyone can follow from A people to B people to C people. And it's difficult. I mean, every day I have to remind myself about a lot of these things, right? Don't be a hater, right? And Ohana, you got to sort of bring people along. And really nobody gets left behind. So you have to role model commitment. And more personally about how I also have to change, right? I'm normally a pretty shy, introverted person. So as I told you, I was eating at my desk, right, for lunch. And I'm typically work through lunch, right? And you try and communicate. I mean, I came from an environment where you can communicate through email, right? But then here in the Philippines, a lot of times, yes, you can communicate by email, but a lot of times I send it out, I don't get answers, right? Like 3 or 4 times, I don't get answers, or it'll just be noted, right, that I sent it. And so part of my adjustment was really seeing, right, in a country with the most emotional people in the world, a lot of the real communication, the substantive information occurs over face-to-face conversations, right? So for me, that entailed really going into people's office and really just chatting, right? Not just 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes, a few hours, right? And really getting some of the basic information and getting a lot of information that you're not going to discover in a periodic, meeting, in a more formal setting. And information I'm not going to find in a board meeting, in a committee meeting, or in a more formal setting. It's really after the meeting and before the meeting in somebody's office that I get sort of the real scoop, right? So that sort of commitment also for myself adjusting helped a lot, right, in becoming more effective. So next slide is also for me, next slide. Sai, that video, we were watching it with my kids. I mean, you see, I don't know if people have seen that video. I think it's Gangnam Style, right? And it's not your sort of traditional looking celebrity, right? Like, Tom Cruise or that kind of person. But I mean, he's sort of a little bigger, right? And if you see the video, the man is committed to dancing, right? And we come from, I still go to a lot of meetings here that are karaoke, right? People love karaoke, and they just belt it out. There is no sort of hesitation, right? No need to actually drink to get yourself the courage. People just commit to singing, right? And so that sort of commitment to something, for me, really, that's how we sort of spark change, right? That's how, for us, as I find people that I, really work well with, it's finding that spark in everyone, right? It's sort of my responsibility to find that spark in everyone, right? Because it's easy to work in an environment where everyone's sort of always performing, right? Always performing, and everyone has high capabilities. But I come from an organization where we don't fire people, right? We don't necessarily downsize a lot. I mean, I think as we sort of change, we're trying to sort of look at those type of options. But a lot of time, it's really working with people to see if people can level up. And so it involves getting that commitment and finding roles for people. So with a lot of this, with getting commitment from people and developing those capabilities, we try and let people lead new projects. So we've been pretty aggressive in the past few years in making some small acquisitions and getting some new business projects and having some of these people lead them. So rather than hiring outside consultants or outside banks, a lot of times we'll have people lead these projects, and hopefully they can develop the capabilities. It takes us longer, but from a business and a family business standpoint, for us, it's a more long-term vision of how we want to change with sort of the pace that we want to change. So now just to look at sort of the summary of our transformation, this is more on sort of summarizing some of what we've done, right? 12% growth, compounded annual growth for the past 5 years in a market that's only growing 3 to 4%, right? So I think we've been able to do a good job of at least still growing more than the market average in a time of change in the industry, change and disruption. We have a lot of consumer health supplements. We have some products which have leadership in some areas of the market, a fast-growing oncology division, and really actively looking for acquisition. So for me, it's really trying to put some sort of goal, right? So something that galvanizes everyone, that can inspire. So for us, it's really looking at potentially listing. I mean, everyone knows here, the market, the Philippines is really doing well. And so as an organization, we're trying to capitalize on this and take advantage of that. And so we're sort of slowly changing. So it's not going to be necessarily in 1 to 2 years, but more 3 to 4 to 5. And hopefully we can do it. We're at year 1. And so we're trying to put in the processes, but make it, in a way that's a little more fun. That's why I tried to include these sort of pictures, right? My prior past presentations are more dense with text, but I thought this might be a little more, because you guys are going to be listening to 10, 12 speakers, just to share a little bit of my experience with you guys. So to sort of summarize, right, for us, it was chapter 1 was really people. Don't be a hater. Really create an environment where people can believe. And it's really giving the opportunity for people to succeed, but also allowing when they fail. We have given second, third, fourth chances to people, right? And it's been, there's that tension there. And so we're still trying to grapple with that. Chapter 2 is Ohana, right? Nobody gets left behind. And it's that sort of commitment that we have to employees that hopefully, because we're not the highest paying in the industry, right? But maybe the fact that we're, sort of committed to really giving them an environment where they can succeed in whatever role, hopefully has helped us grow. And then the third chapter of execution, right? The chicken versus the pig. Commitment versus involvement. So as much as we can, we really try and get that sort of commitment of, staying late nights for implementing SAP, coming in really early, that sort of thing. I mean, everyone sort of recognizes this. And so chapter 4, next slide, it's yet to be written, right? Hopefully that's going to entail a listing and, scaling up. Because for me, in coming back, I actually took a one-way ticket back. And it wasn't, I'd never said, I'm just going to try it for 2 years. It was really, I'm going to scale the business. And so it was really getting an organization to scale. And how do you do that? So hopefully, I mean, it's still a process. Hopefully, you guys have taken something away from my presentation, which doesn't have a lot of text or numbers, but hopefully it's helped. So thank you.